All right, everybody, we're live. This is the first episode of Giant Size Spectacular. We're going to go around the horn and introduce ourselves. We'll start to my right, but which is really my left hand going out. But all right.
Hey everybody, my name is David Green. I'm from Pasadena, California. I'm a freelance storyboard artist. I'm a lifelong comic book fan. I transitioned from comics to storyboards. I wanna, I, we started this mainly because we still love this. We love comics, but we're not as active as we used to be. But we still talk about comics all the time. And John had this great idea, and it was something I couldn't refuse. I said, "Yeah, absolutely, let's do it." And that's who I am. And down below we have
Peter.
Peter.
Me, Peter. Okay. Hi, my name's Peter Haughey. I'm a librarian, also lifelong comic book fan and enthusiast. I worked for a couple of comic book publishers years and years ago, but I definitely didn't make it into the comic book business. I tried very, very hard and wrote a lot and worked with a lot of amazing people and had some amazing experiences. And comics, have always been a huge part of my life, and they continue to be. And as David said, it's something that we talk about absolutely all the time. But it's currently I work as a librarian, and comics just remain to be the sort of backdrop in my life, and they're just everywhere in the things I do. Lots to talk about with them. So I'm excited to be here. Sorry. Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay, I'm John Wales, originally from Chicago, but I've spent most of my life here in California. I was an avid comic book reader, and art was always my doorway into comics. I was trained as an illustrator and have worked as a graphic designer as an adult. I'm now a toy packaging designer, but again, I'm right there with loving comics and still talking about it every day. So that's me.
Sweet. And I am John Hervey. Kind of round out the floor here. I have been a big time lover of comics since day one. I'd say that my journey kind of has been, a kind of a meandering one. Having a desire at a young age to work in comics, having fallen in love with comics, and then just not being something that I sustained myself with. So like Peter, worked at a couple of publishers early, and then went on to another career, but have always had kind of the love of comics in my heart. And it's really nice. I mean, all of us, we've known each other for a really long time. It's when you got folks and you realize that you've known them more than half your life, you realize that it's something to treasure. So even though we're a little bit spread out, we've come together to talk comics. This is our first episode of Giant Size Spectacular, and we kind of wanted to kick this one off with a little bit of kind of our little old school. How did we develop the love for comics?
Well,
Let me start with Dave.
Well, I was thinking about it because it's also funny, everybody, that we all met in Pasadena, and there was a period in Pasadena where there was a lot of opportunities to find comics. We had more than a couple stores. Now there's one great store, Comics Factory. That's where we all met. But before that, there were a lot of options, and I just wanted to start there because before there was comic book stores, we were just you would just, my aunts were in the comics, mainly my aunts, but not like comic book runs. They just like certain characters, and then they had like different books. If you went to their house, you could read through different books, and then when you were on long trips with your parents, your mom would buy you and your brother, me and my brothers, my mom would buy us a couple books, but I didn't know exactly what we were getting into, and then when you get older, it becomes a little more refined, and then you might go into an actual comic book store. But that was, from where I was, that was so far away. So I remember going to 7-Eleven playing video games, and then there was a section of just comics,
Yeah.
And then I didn't get to be into my teens until I had older friends, and an older friend in particular, I'm not going to name him right now. Maybe we'll get him on here one day. But he's the one that started telling me certain artist names. I got into like certain artists because he was into certain artists. He got me into my first comic convention, and I always loved, because I got really into artists because I was drawing, and I got really more into artists than anything else. So that was my love for it, just drawing, art, and then these great stories, these great characters. I was primarily a Marvel guy. Then I got to make my teens, and then I got into DC mainly because of two guys. It was actually Byrne and John Byrne and George Perez, and of course the third guy would be Frank Miller, because I was a huge Frank Miller fan. But that's basically my start, and I don't want to go too long. I just want to go,
All right, cool. Peter, how about you, man?
I was thinking like I had the exact same start. Starting at 7-Eleven, I would go into the 7-Eleven up in Altadena, or maybe just North Pasadena.
Was it up Lake? Was it the one way up Lake?
No, I think it was the one up Altadena, like on Altadena. That's why,
Okay.
but sort of at that, yeah. And I'd go in there, and I've recently acquired the first comic that I remember actually reading. It was this issue of Hawkeye, and it's Hawkeye.
Hold up here, I'm gonna see if I can.
It's Hawkeye and the Garden of Death, guest starring Black Panther.
Now you are. Yep, I just bumped you out. Now you are challenging my ability to. Nope. Nope. All right. I'm gonna figure this out. I'm going to make Peter.
Make me big.
I'm gonna make Peter big.
Remember these Clear Still ads too? Like,
yeah.
Let's go.
There we go.
There we go. Look at that, man.
So that's Hawkeye
Beautiful.
in the Garden of Death with Black Panther. And so I bought this because, I was only able to get one comic. So I figured I was able to get two characters in one comic. And
Smart.
And each guy looked cooler than the other, Black Panther and Hawkeye. But the coolest part of it was actually on the inside, and that was the orb. The orb being what absolutely did it for me, and just how wild comics could be. Just this concept of this guy with this big eyeball helmet.
Yeah.
And so I read that comic over and over and over. I probably didn't even read it. I just looked at the pages and pretended to be Hawkeye. And it probably, like David, it wasn't until I was a teenager that I started going back into comic book stores seriously on my own. I got my driver's license, and I was able to go down to this little comic book shop that was in my neighborhood called Another World Comics, which is a pretty well-known institution in LA, or at least it was.
Yeah.
That's the
I remember
one that was in Eagle Rock?
Yeah, in Eagle Rock.
I remember that one.
Yeah, it was a great spot. And as a kid, I would go there, and I went there for the death of Superman when that was all over the news. Like, we stood in line. I bought the comic. I had no idea what I was really doing or what I was buying, but I knew I had to have the death of Superman. But it wasn't until I was maybe 15 or 16 years old that I went in there and bought an issue of Aquaman, an issue of Green Lantern, and an issue of Flash, because at the time, Aquaman had got his hand cut off. He had long hair and he had a beard.
Yeah. Yep.
Green Lantern was this guy named Kyle Rayner, and I had just happened to pick up some issue of the Flash where it was John Fox was on the cover, the John Fox Flash, and so I was like, "What the hell is happening here?" Like, I know nothing about comics, but, like, I'm completely out of it. I'm like, everything has completely passed me by. All the characters are different, but there was something about it. Like, I wanted to get in on it. Like, I had to get in on the club. And I remember reading that issue of Aquaman. It's Peter David Aquaman, number 23. And I knew nothing about comics and like how they really worked. And I remember at the back of it, they had the letters, right, where people could write in. And in the back of comics, it would always be letters about a previous issue. So this was Aquaman number 23. So people were writing letters about Aquaman number 17. But I didn't really realize how that worked. So I just thought big stuff had happened in Aquaman 17. So like I got in my car again, drove down to the comic book store, and I was like, I need Aquaman 17, and might as well just give me everything in between. And like I went back and just got everything, and I was from there just was completely obsessed, and just it went from there, and then stumbled into the Comics Factory, just like it.
That's awesome.
But yeah,
that's good stuff. So Johnny, you got to tell us from your Midwest perspective how you got into comics, brother.
It's so funny that the parallels are all there. But for me, comics started out as reruns of the '60s Spider-Man. Like it was funny because animation was my start. I knew who they were. I knew of comics. I knew the Sunday comics, so I would read the Spider-Man strips.
Yeah.
And there always was never enough. You'd read one strip and you're like, oh, not enough. And so for me, it was summer vacation. We'd go on a 2-week trip. My dad would have his vacation, and it'd be a camping trip, and my mom would buy us a stack of comics. And so for me, it was like the mid to late 80s, and it was the perfect time for me to be just enough old enough to go, okay, I need more. And so every time we would go into the grocery store, for me, instead of 7-Eleven, it was White Hen Pantry, total Midwestern, same exact thing. But they had the spin, and the spinner rack was the most amazing thing because it was just beat of comics and all of the beautiful art and all these characters I knew, and I wanted to know more. And so it was always a case where summers, like 2 summers in a row, my mom bought us a big stack, and that was kind of like right around that time was when my brother had gotten old enough that they'd allow him to bike away from home over a mile. And he found out what a comic book store was. And I would collect up my allowance, and I'd say, okay, take this and buy me anything around the issue I already have. So I'm going to get it before, after. I want to know more about the story. So that was my little window in. I couldn't even go into the comic book store. I was probably 7th or 8th grade, and I was like, it was probably earlier, 5th or 6th grade, and then that's how I started collecting. Every summer, I'd get like a 3-issue run, and that's how I started collecting. By the time I got to be about 8th grade, the mall generation was in full swing, and there was a stamp and coin collector store that also did a little corner of comics. But the way they would hook people is a pull and hold system, and I had never heard of pull and hold before, and I'm like, what is that? And a friend of mine said, oh, no, it's great. You just tell them the comics you want, and they will hold them for you. And then you go in when you can, and that way you don't miss an issue. And I was like, this is amazing. I don't, because getting out to the mall was not something that was very easy for an 8th grader. And so all of a sudden I was able to pick 1 or 2 or 3 comics, and I was like, I want to follow that one. So X-Men was the one that hooked me, and I don't have the issue, but I have the essential, pardon the light, and it was around this time, and it was actually the anniversary issues with that amazing border with all the Marvel characters framing a single character.
I remember that.
I'm gonna have to go hunt that one out. There was about 3 or 4. I'm showing my age. It was probably the 40th anniversary of Marvel or something like that. And so it was these beautiful covers. They'd have a single character in the middle with the frame on every issue for 1 month.
And the characters were all along the frame, like you said? Yeah.
I don't think it was a 40th.
Was it the
I don't think it was the 40th.
I think it was
20th.
earlier than that, bro.
It was
25th.
It might be.
Oh,
the
man.
25th. It might be the 25th.
Oh man.
How easily it all slips away.
Yeah.
But those covers were the ones that just it was an amazing shot of Wolverine. There was a shot of Captain America, and it was all these beautifully illustrated single shots that really grabbed me, and that hooked me.
Yeah, big time. So for me, it's funny because Peter was saying 7-Eleven was his spot. So we lived up in Altadena. So up lake, there was a 7-Eleven, and then right across from it was Webster's drugstore. So there was a drugstore and a 7-Eleven. And the way I actually got introduced to comics, so you have the drugstore, you have the 7-Eleven, and on kind of catty corner to that was a dress shop that my mom would go to. So I went to the dress shop with my mom, and I'm a little kid, I don't want to be there, but they have magazines there, but then they had a Fantastic Four comic. So I'm kind of reading the comic, and I'm actually not being a pain to my mom because I'm just sitting there reading the comic while she's doing her thing with her dresses. She's ready to go, I'm not ready to go because I haven't finished the comic. So the ladies at the shop figured out one thing. They're like, hey, if we get comics, we can keep kids like John, sedated, while mom buys things. But then I realized, oh man, well, she's like, I just get my comics right over to the 7-Eleven. So we lived close by, so I would have my mom take me to the 7-Eleven, and there was one rack, and it was a full spinner rack of comics. And I was like Johnny, I knew the Spider-Man cartoon. I knew the animatic cartoons that Marvel had with like the Hulk and Thor and Namor.
Those great songs.
Oh man, those songs were epic.
Yeah.
And then I also knew the old Spider-Man cartoon, but I knew the Super Friends as well from the Super Friends cartoon. So I saw comics, and I wasn't aware that comics came first. I'd pick up a Batman here and there, or I'd pick up because I knew Batman, I knew Superman, I knew Wonder Woman. I didn't realize that the Super Friends were the Justice League, and the folks that were on the folks that were usually on the Justice League book, they wouldn't be like Superman or Batman or Wonder Woman. So I just didn't know who they were, and we went to the drugstore, and the drugstore had a rack. So now I'm like, man, okay, so there's a spinner rack of books. One day we show up to the drugstore, they got 2 spinner racks. 2. Wow. So I'm like, and my mom's only going to let me get 1 book, maybe 2, if she's feeling real. So I'm like pining. I'm going through the spinner racks. I'm trying to find, man, what would be, the book that I want to pick up. So I would pick up, like I said, I'd pick up Superman. I'd pick up Wonder Woman. I'd pick up Batman. I didn't really have an idea of continuity, even though there was numbers on the books. I would just pick things up, just random stuff.
The numbers at first are intimidating, but then it becomes a thing where you're like, I got to find everything, like Peter had said, Sorry, but go ahead.
No, that's cool. And it's so the numbers to me were just like, okay, well, there is some kind of sequence, but whatever. And then go ahead, Peter.
Well, I was going to say, just like you said, continuity isn't something that we really knew. I mean, cartoons and shows were episodic, and everything just sort of ended. So I think at least my expectation of a comic was just, it should just be like a one and done kind of thing, or you assume it's just one story, or it's going to be kind of like self-contained. And this idea, it expands outside of this one issue is crazy. And I think, John, you mentioned the Spider-Man comic strip, and I was the same way. Like, so short, and like you want more, and you're just like, wait, what? Like, there was nothing happened here. Like, you gotta get some.
Gotta get some more.
Yeah,
I'm laughing at Eric saying that his grandma introduced him to comics, and every time he'd go visit, and she would have little gifts for he and his brother. And she handed him 2 Beavis and Butthead comics. Grandma obviously didn't read those before she gave them to you, but that is so cool.
Yeah.
the grandma was hooking you up with the comics.
You know, I think it's also funny how we've all kind of said the same thing, that what we're introduced to is like, well, we knew about comics, we knew about the cartoons, we knew about the Super Friends or the Batman show, the Adam West Batman. I mean, I remember
Adam West
Absolutely.
is Batman. That's who Batman was when I was a kid.
right?
Yeah.
And and the Superman movies and like all this kind of stuff, and we were exposed to like all this non-comic book comic stuff before we actually got the comic books. And I don't know, I think it's just funny now that as comic book fans, I've definitely been guilty of like looking around and grumbling at like people watching Teen Titans Go and all this other stuff. Like you don't know what it's really like. This is all just the nonsense. You got to get to the real core of it. And it's like, but people will, like they will get there. Even today, that I don't know. They're like I just had like hearing that shared experience between all of us. I just had a glimmer of hope that.
Because it's always off camera, folks. We were about to start Blind, and then I had the idea. I said, "Well, what was the book that did it?" And that's why John and Peter showed a book. Me and John also have a book, but we wanted to centralize. It was a book. What was the book that did it? Because that like pretty much changed your life.
Yeah.
And it could be a series of books and it's like I just remember, I remember reading the Phoenix Saga, and that was like nothing I could even comprehend. I was like, what am I reading? And because it was so deep, there was the storyline in the Fantastic Four with Frankie Ray. Maybe Frankie Ray was going to become the fifth member of the Fantastic Four, and they're going to become the Fantastic Five. And then what John Byrne does is totally out of left field, but it totally makes sense how he resolves that issue. And if I didn't have enough time because that was buried in my box, but that issue is one of the most incredible, not even issues, just stories I've ever read, ever experienced, transcending novels, movies, or whatever. It just was like, it was bigger than just being a comic book to me. The best stories I've ever read have been, you should read the Phoenix Saga if you get a chance. But it's not just the Phoenix Saga. I think you have to read the X-Men, that Byrne Claremont X-Men for like, I think you have to read it for like a year to get to that, to get the full impact of it, because it's such a big story, it's an incredible story,
It's worth it though.
It's worth it because it's not even going to be a thing like you're miranding through it. You're just going to be like, whoa, it's like completely. I mean, those guys utilize and realize those X-Men so well that like when the payoffs that in the Phoenix Saga are just like, I mean, it's just insane stuff, man. It's really good stuff. Byrne was like, John Byrne is incredible.
That's you know what? That's too much of a segue into the book that got me into comics.
Yeah.
This book off the shelf. Let's see if I can do this without. This is a Perez cover.
Yeah.
With interiors by Byrne.
Yeah.
So Byrne did the interiors of this book, and they're phenomenal. So, I mean, as you can tell, the book has seen much use. This was the book. This was the book that got me into comics. I knew Iron Man from the '60s cartoon. I didn't know a lot of these characters. My buddy was an X-Men fan. He was an X-Men collector, so I'd seen the Beast, but I didn't really know him that well. And then these other characters, this was actually ended up being the introduction of Ms. Marvel to the Avengers. I read this book multiple times. And then I literally proclaimed to my mom, I'm now a comic collector. And she was like, that's good, baby. You eat your greens. You go finish your dinner.
All right. What was the book that did it for me? And I have the issues, but I had to bring out the trade, obviously. And all you guys already know. but you know it has to be Frank Miller.
Yeah.
It's like Frank Miller's Daredevil run.
Woo!
I love this run so much that I didn't want to like that Ben Affleck Daredevil movie, but they did some of the Frank Miller stuff in there, and I was in there just like I couldn't believe it. I was like, oh my god, because when they did, the moment I become my life has changed is right here with Bullseye fighting Elektra, and he tells her she's pretty good, but he's magic, you know.
Yeah.
And he tells her you're pretty good, but me, I'm magic. And then and then this panel at the bottom, and for my next trick, I won't spoil his next trick, but
dude, that book. Not to cut you off, my friend, Herb Dean, MMA, Herb Dean. He was a friend of mine, Pasadena guy, Altadena dude.
Yeah.
He collected Daredevil. He had that run. I remember this so vividly, reading that at his house, and I was in awe. I didn't know. I had all these crazy emotions. I'm like, he killed her. I'm like, what is going on? Where's Daredevil? How is this happening?
Yeah, and Daredevil it's like he's dealing with it after it happens.
Okay, so for my man Eric, he and we concur on something. Definitely John Byrne's Superman, his Man of Steel.
Yeah.
And the run that he did on Action Comics and on Superman, the best Superman stories.
Well,
and I love those are like the best stories. Period. I love them.
That's when I finally went over to DC, because Byrne went to DC, and I was reading, because I came in late, because I read that, then I read Crisis after that, because remember, Crisis solidified everything, and then Byrne goes over and he does this Man of Steel run, and I remember the hunt. I always tell the story because you can just get the trade now, but there was no trade, and I had to go to different cons and buy the issues like one by one. And I didn't want to read all of them till I had all of them. And I remember the last one I found, and it was crazy because I'm digging through long boxes, and the last issue I find is Final Fate of Flash, and you flip through and you see that cover and you're like, and that was it. And then I read it, and of course it definitely lived up to the hype. But I was talking to a friend of mine about that Byrne run on Superman. What's insane about that is that's like what is that, like 2 years he did that run?
Yeah. And he was doing 2 books, dude.
Yeah.
He was doing Action Comics. So he did Man of Steel, then he did Action Comics and Superman. Exactly. And it was all fire.
Yeah, and he was still right. And then he did the World of Krypton. Byrne was, he was doing some pretty incredible stuff. And I think that even when Frank left, Frank came over to DC. He did Ronin, then he did Dark Knight, and the Ronin stuff is so insane to look at because the stuff he's doing, and then this is me and John's area where it was just art, but the stuff he's doing, how he's drawing this stuff, the experiments what he's experimenting with is insane, But because he's bringing all the Mobius influence of the European comics and all the Japanese comics, that was a really great time for comics, and I still have all that stuff. A lot of it's boxed up, No,
that stuff is classic.
Yeah.
No, and I think that's one of the things is just like kind of that visceral response that you get from some of these stories. I really feel like we kind of grew up in a golden age of comics. For me, I was buying Byrne, Perez. Those are just my staples. That's kind of became my expectation.
Yeah.
It was like, oh yeah, what's Byrne doing? What's Perez doing?
Yeah, and what's funny is there's these different writers that I was unaware of them as writers, but I was unaware of who they were until I kept seeing the names, and then I was like, and that guy really writes great stuff. And I mean, I remember the name I kept seeing was Bill Mantlo, and I always loved anything Bill Mantlo, because Bill Mantlo created Rocketeer. No, sorry, Rocket Raccoon. All right,
There you go.
Sorry about that. He created Rocket Raccoon, and he created Cloak and Dagger. He was writing
I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was writing the Micronaut stuff early on. He was doing all the Micronaut stuff, but he was writing all these books. And a lot of times I'll be reading something and Bill Mantlo's name will pop up, and then I'll be reading it, then I have to go back to the beginning, and I'm like, oh, this is a Mantlo story. But there are always these guys like that. He's just one guy I'm picking out right now, but he was a guy. I mean, I almost always had a good time reading one of his stories.
Yeah,
it's an interesting point you bring up, John, because I feel like the 80s, what made them so good was that they were looking to move beyond the 60s and 70s era, but they did it with a lot of respect. And I guess I think David and I have talked about this a lot, where it feels like in the 2000s, and it's probably our perspective, is they're looking to change things just to change them. And so I think we were it was what was such a treat for those 80s and maybe even the early 90s run, was there's still a lot of respect for what had come before, but they wanted to push the envelope or push things to a new level. And so I always find that real interesting when I look at that, and the characters still felt recognizable in the 80s. The 60s, and you can pick up runs from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, and they all still feel like the same characters. In the 90s, I wonder if that's when the wheels came off a little bit.
Well, talking about issues that did it, or some key points. One of the big times for me, like I feel like I came in kind of late in the game. Kingdom Come was huge for me. Like I read that, and that blew my mind. I don't know if but what you guys
absolutely
thought, but like
I had stopped reading comics for about 2 years, and then because I was just reading, it was about 2 or 3 years, because I was actually reading a lot more novels. And then I came back into the comic store because Undercover Comics was gone. Then Comics Factory had really started to take off. And I made friends with the owner, George, because we were always in there hanging out with George. And then even when the store was closed, we'd be hanging out with him. And George was kind of telling me what to check out. And then he said, oh, they got this new thing, Kingdom Come. And I'd never seen, I was like, wow, because I hadn't seen Marvels. So
was it I think first, right?
Marvels was first, and then Kingdom Come, and then but I remember reading Kingdom Come, and I was like, holy cow, this is really great. It was a lot of fun, because it was also a lot of fun just to find the Easter eggs.
And for me, that was the Wizard. Because I like experiencing comics. For me, I couldn't do that without Wizard, and like what that was always just like the key to tell me like what to read and what was good. Like I was that I don't know. I feel like that.
So you can't, like Wizard, us old guys, we know what you're talking about, but you got to give some context to folks about Wizard magazine.
Oh yeah, Wizard magazine.
Wizard was like the only. It was the only time I actually felt like I understood what people meant. You see magazines like People and Cosmo, and like, what the hell are people getting out of this? And then finally there was something I'm like, it's Sports Illustrated for me. Like it's something I like that cover to cover. I actually understood what it felt like to have a magazine like for people like me. And they don't print it anymore. But yeah, at the time it was just this magazine that was all about comics. And I mean, it was. Even Wizard itself had like its own sort of like continuity to it, and like inside gags and stories.
Yeah,
it made it a lot of fun. But you're talking about changing things up, and I have to mention it because it got me into the store when I was a little kid, and that was the death of Superman. It got me into the store when they did the rebirth of Superman, and they did all the like variant, who was the real Superman, and I fell for it. I'm like, oh my god, which is it? Like, is it the Terminator? Is it Superboy? Like, there's 4 of them. Like, this is, it's got to be one of them, right? And even
Right.
they did the costume change of Superman, and they gave him like the electric thing. I loved it. I loved how they were constantly messing with Superman, and like people would still complain about it. And everyone would want Superman to go back to like what they knew, but they
Right.
I hear what you're saying about them doing it with respect to the 80s, but there was definitely some crazy stuff happening in the 90s where they were just like doing everything they could to like torture and kill Superman and just like stretch him out in such a weird way. But but you can't, he does. It's
No, it was. I mean, it was crazy because you had the reign of the Supermen, and you had all these Supermen.
Yeah.
And all of us, it was like the Who Killed JR. I mean, all of us were trying to see who is the real Superman.
I think you say Who Killed Mr. Burns. That's where I was going to go with that.
I think I might have even been working at a comic book store when all that was going on. In the 90s, they had a lot of... They were taking a lot of chances. You're right, because there was kind of an open nature to, how can we generate excitement? How can we engage people? How can we, progress characters? And so a lot of that, I mean, even from the inside of watching people come in who had never been in a comic book store before in their lives, and they would walk in and go, "Do you have the Death of Superman?" And of course, it was, a great gimmick for somebody who's running a business to get people in.
Yeah.
But and for me, it took a while to buy in, being that I wasn't a big DC guy, and to me, it stunk of a gimmick. Oh, they're gonna kill. They're gonna bring him back, which everybody knows. A lot of times, very very rarely is it a death in a comic book, especially of a main character. So, but I do now look back on that and think that was a pretty bold move and a very interesting method for going about creating 4 Supermans. And it also opened up kind of, I mean, long before they were caring too much about the diversity of it. I'm sure it would look completely different today, but the introduction of Steel and and that and I don't know that people think too much about that. That's where his origin comes in,
right?
And so I've actually kind of liked the Steel character, when it moved beyond just this.
It's when we were talking, I was pulling some books. I mean, I'm looking. It would take me a second to grab them, but I have a stack of Steel that I've been going back and purchasing. It's incredible what an amazing character that was, and just like Eric said in the chat, like, yeah, that reign of Superman introduced some really crazy stuff, and I could talk forever about Steel. Steel in itself was just like a really amazing outcome, like this Iron Man, Superman, like, what a great character. I loved him.
Yeah. Eric, I had kind of expunged the Shaq Steel out of my mind.
Yeah.
That with the
he gets a pass for that because he was on the Lakers at the time.
Exactly. If you're on the Lakers, you can do no wrong.
Was he a Laker yet?
I think so, because that's when he started doing all his Hollywood stuff. I think because he did like Kazam or something like that, and Steel, and he was making rap albums. He had Twism, The World Is Mine.
Oh boy.
Yeah, he was doing all kinds of stuff in LA. I tell you, LA isn't good for everybody.
That movie tanked the character, I think, which is sad. I mean,
Green that's what people associated with.
Well, at least it got released. I was like, but we're not going there. We're not going there.
How terrible! Yeah, okay, we're not. Can't go there.
Yeah, we're not going there. But you know what? It helps me appreciate, and I appreciate what Eric said. I appreciate what you guys both said about the characters that came out of that, because I think the 90s was really kind of the last of the eras where characters were still really being created. Because all the way up through then, it's like, even if you look at all the movies and TV shows, all those characters were created, probably from between the 60s and the 90s, the characters that are really prominent. And then, what's really been going on since then?
Well,
You know?
You have a lot of characters as derivative of other characters, and to keep them fresh, or to introduce them to newer audiences, which I get, because it could be intimidating to go, well, this version of Peter Parker, which is our version, is they don't feel they can identify with that, and like, so they make them younger and hipper, and I get it. You know, it's just so funny to me, because I remember when the newer movies, when the Sam Raimi stuff came out, and like all through this time in the 2000s when they were doing the Spider-Man movies, I remember hearing them trash the old TV show, the live action one, which is insane, because I remember when I was a kid and that came out, and I was like,
Bro,
oh my God,
I
Spider-Man,
loved that TV show when I was a kid.
right? And it
Uh-huh.
was like, because
I still remember the music.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, because we'll start doing it right now, but I don't want to get into that black hole. But like, no, I was like, Spider-Man's fighting ninjas, you know. Like,
Yeah.
We flipped out as kids. Those were, made for TV movies, but there was something so amazing about it even coming out. Amazing. And so yeah, that even that was there was something magical to see that come out.
yeah, because I remember when I saw the last Spider-Man movie, whatever it was called, when all the Spider-Man would come out in it, I was upset that they didn't have the guy from the TV series. I was like, well, you couldn't bring this guy? I thought that would have been great, but I don't know anything.
I was wondering if there was a cameo of him somewhere. There was a couple like little characters where I was like, but
yeah, I don't know. I was a little bummed about that, but they were doing this new thing, but that's just because I'm old,
And Eric, I have to also admit, I was already kind of on the down cycle of reading comics, so I didn't really see a lot of those runs like you're talking about in the 2010s, with the Lantern characters that were created. I guess I saw the effect of that. Like, I think Justice League and some of the other cartoons had a lot of the kind of the Lantern Corps, and there's some cool Lantern Corps characters. So I have to admit that I have been in a place where for a while where I had been struggling with comics, just because I wanted to be involved so bad, and like he was talking about the shop we went to, best shop, Comics Factory, love the owner, love the people that work there, but I'd go there and then a lot of the stories I'm just like, oh, you're killing me, Smalls. So I miss that.
It's funny because like as we're talking, like I keep thinking like that it's very possible that we're missing something in some stuff, right? I mean, they're definitely taking chances. They're definitely making a lot of huge changes, that are everyone's talking about. It's very controversial, they're choosing to make some things controversial, but. I mean, some of the characters look pretty amazing. I don't know. They did that the X-Men Children of the Atom. Like, I thought it looked cool. I thought it had some good looking character designs. And my problem isn't so much the stories and like the directions that they're going with the characters. For me, I can't pick up the comic because of the execution and the cost. They're charging $4 or $5 for a book that you can read. I mean, you can read a comic these days. The average Marvel or DC comic, I pick it up and I'm done with it in like 2 or 3 minutes, and I don't feel like I've gotten any kind of a story out of it. And that's where I get frustrated, and that's where I'm just like, I can't with comics right now. It's not so much the pushing of the envelope. It's just that it's a lot of these other nuts and bolts, I think, that have been keeping me out of it and making me sort of retreat a lot to this older stuff. But I mean, like, this was horrible back then. People went nuts. Like people were trashing it like crazy. And just like, I think there's a lot of stuff out there in the shops that, that I walk in, I'll initially see. I'm like, that's weird. Like, why'd you have to do my favorite character like that? But, at the end, I think that there might be, I don't know. I feel like I want to go out there and check some stuff, see what I might actually missing. But like I say, it's the execution burning me on a lot of.
I hear you, and that's the reason why I've been buying indie books for the last couple of years. It's a premium. It's more expensive because you're backing crowdfunding books. They're not moving. We don't move the units.
But are you
but
full story out of a book, right? Are you
get stories. You get stories, and you get that same feel that you got back in the 80s and the 90s, where the creators, and even though these folks didn't own the characters, you felt like they did.
Mm-hmm.
It's like when these guys went on a run, you felt like they owned those characters.
Yeah, like the Hulk, that's Peter David's. Like that's which is the same to me. But he obviously wasn't the creator of the character. And just like talking about John Byrne, and Superman. Well, I also associate him with Wonder Woman too. But I think he didn't get on that until that was probably in the later 90s, wasn't it?
Yeah, he got on. He got on for a little while in I think the later 90s. But like didn't I lend you a couple issues of his Superman, Peter, at one point?
I feel like I did. I'm trying to think what issues was that
he did an issue that I think now is problematic. I may have lent it to you because I just thought it was so awesome, because it was actually the first time I ever saw Mr. Miracle, and that's the one where where Darkseid's one of his underlings that was so awful that he actually kicked him out. He expelled him. The guy's called Sleaze. And he captures Wonder Woman and Superman, and they make an adult movie.
Are you talking about Byrne's Action Comics?
Yeah. You saw that one?
Did I read this?
This is in one of the Action Comics. No, it was Big Barda. It was Big Barda and Superman.
Right. That's right. It's Big Barda
with Sleaze. It was dope.
Yeah, Byrne did this in the
there you go.
movies, and he doesn't don't show anything. It's just implied, right. And you're reading it, and you're like, but like, yeah, they did. And you got to figure, like guys who are reading Superman in the 50s, those guys would have hated that,
right?
Whereas we're like, well, why couldn't that happen? But it's like, so now sometimes when I'm reading stuff, I'm like, I'm shaking my fist like an old man. I'm like, oh, well, why are they doing that? And it's just like, well, these guys don't have the restraints that we have. They go, well, why couldn't the characters do this?
Well, Superman should not be sodomized.
Yeah.
Did that happen?
I can't. My heart was so broken. I saw they showed a page where he was like being restrained, and I'm like, I can't.
Yeah, so
I can't. Yeah, I can't.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
but like, I sorry, I'm still tripping that they said that wrong. But yeah, it was Big Barda and Superman, and then Mr. Miracle has to. The whole issue is Mr. Miracle, and I was like, because I didn't know anything about really the New Gods or anything, but that Byrne's run on Action Comics and was basically my introduction to the New Gods, because I had seen Kirby. I knew who Kirby was. I wasn't a huge Jack Kirby fan until, in my late teens, early 20s, and all of a sudden I recognized, holy, this guy is like incredible. Yeah. And it's so funny because I've been organizing my books, because I got all my books out of storage. I had so many doubles of so many things. I had doubles of like all kinds of comics that I was giving off to different friends. I was like, okay, well, I don't need more than one copy of this. So I would do the only doubles I won't part with are my Dave Stevens Rocketeer stuff. That's the only stuff I won't part with, because I'm just like, no, why don't I need 5 copies of the Rocketeer?
Right.
That's the only thing I won't part with. The Rocketeer is a whole other thing in itself. When I start talking about Dave Stevens and the Rocketeer, I love. I love that. I love the Rocketeer so much. I love that they made that movie, and I love that they only made one because I know the whole franchise plan, and I'm glad that it was only one movie because you can just pop in that one movie, and you're like, man, this is a lot of fun, you know.
I have to say to Eric, that's got to be bad for Mr. Miracle, because afterwards, she goes back to Mr. Miracle and is like, really, that's it?
Now I need to read this run. I admit I
well, apparently I have it. I guess
I think I let you borrow because I
single issues.
It's a single issue. I can't even because I thought I was down to I'm down to 3 boxes. It looks like I'm up to 6 boxes now, and I think 2 short boxes. So of books I won't get rid of, but it's in there somewhere. We'll have to dig it out next time you come on over.
All right. Are there any books that you will always purchase multiples of?
There's an issue of Doctor Strange that that Michael Golden drew.
Oh, Michael Golden.
There's an issue that he drew an issue where Doctor Strange he's in some lovesick funk over Clea, and he starts having hallucinations. I think I bought that one 4 or 5 times.
I think you told me about that. Put that on the app.
Did you read it?
Yeah, I read that.
What'd you think?
That was awesome. Yeah, that was.
And I think that's Roger Stern that wrote that one. I think.
Yeah.
And that's a really good one. That's a really good one.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did read a story that I liked recently was Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin.
Oh really? Is
that like a new story? New Teenage Mutant?
Yep, it's a new story.
Really?
It's a new story. It's a story set in the future, and only one of the turtles is left. So first, you got to figure out which turtle is left, and then it unravels the story as to why that is the only turtle left. And then
you can't just look at what color his headband is.
No, you can't, because this turtle has all the weapons.
That's
of all of his brothers.
David and I often lament how the childizing of the turtles, because that was such a groundbreaking thing for in the 80s to have these black and white comics, and they did such a good job of writing the characters that you knew who was talking with no color. And so seeing those toys, I mean, I admit that as a kid, I dug all of the cartoons and toys, and they were fun.
For sure.
But as I got a little older, it was kind of like, oh yeah, why do they have to make it so simplified? Why'd they have to,
But this is another example of starting with the animation and then going to the comics. I first was exposed to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles through the animation.
Really?
Yes. Wow. And then after the animation, that's when George was just like, really, dude? Here, you need to check this out. And I was like, oh wow, this is gritty. This is cool.
It's
the animation was my first exposure to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
I remember when I first saw the comic, and it had kind of a Frank Miller cover because they were doing the hatching like Frank Miller, and then also the first issue is a different size than the big two, like Marvel, DC. The comic is like wider, so it looks different. And then I remember reading it and just like I was floored by it. I was just like, this is like the coolest thing ever, because there was a clear line between Marvel and DC. The books are different. Mm-hmm. Then there's a clear line between the big two and independent books.
Right.
Because the books, the art, the color, the texture, everything's different. And that was one of the cool things when you venture out into independent books, because I ventured out, and I remember, and it goes back to Dave Stevens, when he did a couple color covers, and he did one story for a book in the 80s called Alien Worlds. And that's another book that I buy multiple copies of. It's like there's one Aurora, this character Aurora, and if I find that book, I buy it. And I have a number of copies of it because I love that book so much, because I mean it's just so beautifully drawn. And like I when I went to the Dave Stevens Museum a couple months ago, I bought a print of that cover, and they had his original pages there.
Was that the San Diego Comic-Con Museum?
And the Comic-Con Museum. I heard one of my buddies told me he was there, and because he lived down in San Diego, and then I just jumped in the car that Saturday and headed down there and did a day in San Diego. I haven't been to the con. Last time me and John went to San Diego Con, I think was in 2006 or 7.
I think so.
I haven't, probably 2007, I think.
Yeah.
But I haven't been to the con, and they weren't even selling the pages. They were just displaying them. I think his estate was they were just displaying the pages. But it was I bought a print, and it was funny because I remember I went to the gift shop to buy a print because I was excited to see the show, but I was like, hopefully they'll have prints. And I got in there. Guy told me I was the first person to buy a print, which was I couldn't believe. But I bought this new print. Let me grab it. I'll show it to you.
What about you guys? Are there any comics that you buy multiples of?
I have been so out of buying comics that I almost now feel like I need to go back and buy some of those ones I was talking about, because I've moved enough, and at one point in my late 20s, it was too hard to move all my long boxes. And so I ended up donating them. And I was trying to save a handful of comics, but I haven't really gone out hunting for comics. And I almost feel like after talking here, I need to head over to a comic shop.
That's what I feel like. I'm not I gotta get to a comic shop. I'm not giving the new stuff a fair shake. I gotta to find some good new stuff. I'll get to check out some of these independent books that John's talking about.
I usually try to go to the Comics Factory and check out what they have, and sometimes I come out with something, But yeah, I got this one from Stuart Ing a couple months. Was it last?
Yeah. Dude, that's dope.
Yeah.
Golly.
Yeah. So I have to have this girl framed.
Yeah,
man.
It's funny because David and I go to a art bookstore in Torrance called Stuart Ing, and I find that I'm buying people's sketchbooks and stuff like that more than I've been buying comics these days. Kind of cuts out the middleman when it comes to appreciating art, but and that's kind of where I'm feeling like I have such an itch right now to pull out some comics and read some. So I'll have to start putting a little work in.
Yeah, I'm buying a lot of indie books, but you're asking Peter about books that what I've actually been repurchasing are runs that I have, like my Byrne runs. I got my Man of Steel. I've got my my Byrne run of Alpha Flight. Let's go. My X-Men Byrne run, my George Perez, Marv Wolfman, Wonder Woman runs. I've been starting to buy those in collections because, my books are like this. They're going to turn into ash and dust, because so I buy them so I can just start reading them again.
Yeah, I have a number of the issues that Barry Windsor Smith did early on in Conan. Those books are older than me, and I am terrified to open them now. So I had to re-buy them. I went to Comics Factory, and I asked when Stacy was working there. I asked her, did she have any of those? They had them in a database, but they didn't have them on the sale floor. she actually found them for me, all the collected, the collected Dark Horse versions of the Baron Windsor Smith stuff, and I just bought all of them because I just am too scared to open up the original. But like you just said, with my Alpha Flight run or my Simons and Thor run, I don't want to open those ever again, because they're over 30 years old now, and that's crazy.
So I've been, I know David's been using it, but one of the things I've been going back and doing to stay somewhat connected with comics is using the Marvel Unlimited app. You guys been using this?
No.
Oh my God. Okay.
Pretty neat.
Every Marvel comic ever printed, reproduced. I mean, you can read all the books that we're talking about. Most of them. It was funny actually. That issue of Hawkeye, that Avengers Spotlight, that one's not on there for some reason, which is kind of weird. But you can read anything on there, and I've been doing that like crazy, going back and reading just a lot of the old stuff.
Yeah, Peter hit me onto it.
Fantastic Four.
Yeah, Peter hit me onto it, and I was reading some stuff, and then we were sending stuff back and forth because I started reading these issues of Power Man and Iron Fist.
Yeah, that was digital. Terrible.
Yeah, it's digital. Sorry, but
amazing though. I have to say, there's definitely been times where I've read something like, oh, it's great, and I'll pick up the analog issue, and I'm just like, oof, the digital looks nice. I get it, but
and you can come in and out, because you can go into the panels and whatnot. No, they do a really good job.
Yeah, they really do. I mean, as a librarian, I love print and paper as much as anyone else. I totally get it, but the depth of the content that they have on there has actually made it, I think, a lot of fun. So,
guys,
we're speaking of which,
go ahead.
It's speaking of the spinner racks, the True Believers that they're putting out, the dollar comics. Those have been amazing, re-entry, I think, into comics, or at least. Except it's no fun when you see a True Believer comic of something that you have the original of, and they're selling it for $1 because it's so old and a classic. Like, that's when I feel old. So
yeah, exactly. Well, we've run a little over an hour, and there's a number of shows that are coming up right behind us. So wanted to first and foremost say thanks to Eric and Tyler and Rod, and there's probably a couple other ghost folks that were in there, but thank you guys. Appreciate you guys being part of the conversation. The four of us are going to be getting together on a weekly basis. We've got a lot of fun things to talk about. These guys have a pretty extensive background, so we'll start getting into some of that, and we'll start getting into some other fun topics. So I don't know if any of you guys want to say anything in leaving.
Well, no, it's great being here. Great chatting with my guys. Maybe we can find a way to go to the comic book store together.
I was going to say, yeah, this was one of the best comic book hangouts I've had in ages. So, like old times. So thanks.
Yeah.
No, I appreciate it.
Be back. I'm looking forward to this. It's going to be great.
All right.
Well, with that said, we appreciate all you guys. Thank you so much for the support, and we will see you next week.
Later.